May 23rd. Let's call the Wilton Board of Education meeting to order. Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda?
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion.
Thank you, Pat. Is there a second? Thank you, Pam. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Comments from the public. The board has set aside time at the beginning and end of regular meetings for public comments for members of the public to share their views on matters involving the Wilton Public Schools and to help inform the board's decisions on such matters. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to any one subject. For the record, please also give your name and address. The board considers the views of citizens in its deliberations and welcomes and appreciates public comment. The board listens to public comment thoughtfully and with interest. The board, however, generally does not respond to public comment during board meetings by offering commentary or answering questions. The board also invites commentators and the public to contact the board or the superintendent directly with any specific questions or comments. The board, through the chair and the superintendent, may respond to questions and comments offered during public comment or shared directly, and in responding may also direct members of the public to appropriate staff members for a response. Are there any comments from the public? Yeah. Consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Pam. I'll take Lori as a second. Thank you, Lori. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. No board chair's report. We'll move to superintendent.
Great. I just have a few congratulations in order. First, we want to congratulate the cast and crew of the Addams Family who put on a spectacular show.
So funny.
It was so good.
Their
Right, so
timing,
hopefully
their
everyone had a chance to
comedic
see it.
timing was amazing, amazing. It was just a great, great show.
Yeah, great. So congratulations. Once again, another spectacular high school production. So we look forward to the next one in the fall. We also want to congratulate our boys baseball team, who are the FCAC runners-up. They, earlier this week, upset Ward, which is the best baseball team in the state by a long shot, which was incredible. And then they lost in a tough one last night to Trumbull, so they're the runners-up. But they've had a great season so far. We'll see what they get done in states. We have a couple of FCAC championships on our track and field team. So Allison Raymond was the FCAC champion for the triple jump. Melinda Pettit was the FCAC champ for high jump. And then two of our tennis players, Phoebe Snow and Abby Burns, have a perfect record heading into the playoffs. So fingers crossed that continues. So congratulations to all of them. We also want to just congratulate the high school in general. Last Monday, they held their annual award ceremony, and again, I know a number of you attended. Just a fabulous opportunity to recognize so many of our accomplished students. I was really pleased to see that two of our students have been granted admission to the United States Military Academy at West Point, and they'll be attending, and I understand they'll have a little recognition at graduation too, so nice to see that in place. And then just last piece here, you might have caught the news, Heather had a piece in Good Morning Wilton. One of our students, Daniel Babishak, earlier this year, reached out to CC Mayor and had proposed that the state legislature take some action and provide some grant money so we can pursue the installation of dishwashers here in our kitchens. Something that, as you know, or should hopefully know, Tammy Thornton's been working on for years. And so these two kind of got together, reached out to Cece, and in one of the large spending bills that came through the legislature a couple weeks ago, $20,000 was earmarked for the high school to pursue this. So Daniel and Tammy are working, and we're hoping to be able to install dishwashers in a couple of our schools in the fall and remove all of the plasticware, remove all of the styrofoam plates, and just continue the sustainability journey that Heather really launched us on. I don't know how many years ago.
It is. That was, we started this 6 years ago, trying to get a dishwasher.
Yeah, it's been a slow plod for sure.
Yeah.
So this will.
I've had my hands on lots of garbage cans in 8 years, so I'm trying to pull plastic forks out of the compost bin. So
Right.
it'll be really nice to.
Might be
have
time
that
for you to
in
come
place.
back around and do
Yeah,
a little
well, I
monitoring.
might pull the gloves back on just for good time's sake.
So that's all I have. But, yeah,
Nice.
thank you to Daniel for his advocacy and his work.
Move on to review and discuss. I'd like to ask the board for a motion to move the facilities update, which is listed third, to the top of the agenda, so we can go through that first, and then Mr. Kyer can, oh, I'm sorry, I ticked off the financial report and I skipped it. So, I'm gonna move back for a minute. I'm sorry, I didn't do that on purpose, but finally, for the financial report. So, we're getting close to the end of the year, so we're starting to close out POs, working with the schools to make sure that everything that's encumbered is paid for, everything that's been done is taken care of. We're working on the last pays, the final teacher pay, but we look like we're going to be in good shape for the end of the year. It's going to be close, but we will stay on budget. The Board of Finance did approve the reimbursement from the town for the $163,000 for the emergency repairs at Middlebrook and Cider Mill that were completed earlier this year, so we're anticipating that money within the next week or two. The Cider Mill gym repairs are temporarily on hold because we're waiting for the moisture content in the concrete floor to lower to 4%. But they have the materials, so once everything's set, that should be finalized. And again, we were looking at approximately $30,000 that will get paid out for that. And then with the fire at Cider Mill, it looks like we will just have the $10,000 deductible is all that we're anticipating for that. So we're getting that taken care of. And then towards the bottom of the report, there's a new line for utility vehicles. So in the winter, there was, one of the trucks was in an accident, it was totaled. We did receive $42,000 from the insurance company. We do have a truck on order. It is being prepared for us now. So the balance for the truck will be the board's responsibility, which is a little over $26,000. But we are expecting that before the close of this year, and we do have money set aside for it. So that's a truck and plow? Yep.
Yeah.
Any questions?
I can't remember if we asked this in previous meetings, but do we expect our insurance costs to go up because of the
I mean,
number of claims?
I don't know that they'll go up because of the claims, but they go up, we estimate annually about 5% for liability insurance. That's what we estimated this year, and that's what we budgeted. I don't think we saw a variance after, the previous issues with Cider Mill.
Yeah, and the transfers seem pretty
Standard.
yes.
Busy end of year as we're
Yes.
closing out. One of the, you'll see transfers to athletics transportation to cover some of those costs. The bus company has been experiencing a more acute driver shortage in the last month or so, and that's created a number of challenges for us, some of which you may have already be aware of, but one of them is when we can't get STA to cover our athletic trips, we have to revert back to third contractors, so we're much more expensive. So we've had to feed more money to those lines than we anticipated.
Thank you. Now, we'll ask for a motion to please move the facilities update to the first order under review and discuss.
So moved.
Thank you. I'm going to take Lori as the first and Pam as the second. Is there all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carries unanimously. Mr. Kaya, if you'd like to.
Great,
come on up.
so let's welcome Eric Kyer here to the boardroom. Wherever, Eric, if you want to come and sit, we really don't stand on formality around here. Just by way of background for the group, Eric is the lead architect at KG&D. He facilitated the facilities study. He's got some skin in the game here because he's a longtime Wilton resident, has kids in our school system, it's come through, right? So what else can we say about you?
You're stealing my thunder. Yes, Eric Kyer, KGD Architects. We were retained last summer to look at your facilities, and as Dr. Smith mentioned, 3 kids who've gone through the school system. The final 2 are just about to graduate, so thank you very much for educating them for the last 13 years. Actually, with the other one, about the last 18 years. It's been terrific. Anyway,
Well, hold on, you gotta tell them what they're up to next year, where they're going. We got
Yeah.
a lot of good news here.
Yeah, we
Maybe
need to
not.
have the points of pride.
so my oldest is graduating on Saturday from Cornell University. She went to the hotel school, and she is going off to Aspen to work at the Little Nell, which is a really high-end hotel right in Aspen. She was on the ski team and ski team captain when she was here, and so she can't wait to get back out to the mountains from rainy Ithaca, New York.
Yeah.
The other 2 are also heading west. I think it has something to do with my wife Julie and I, that they've all decided to go as far away from us as possible. One's heading off to Montana and the other's to California. So
Congratulations.
thank you.
They're ready for adventures.
They are definitely ready for adventures. I don't think we'll see them back here in Connecticut anytime soon.
Well, you have great places to go visit.
Yeah.
We do. Frequent flyer miles. Anyway, so last summer we spent several months going through 3 of the 4 schools, and we put together a report which we'd like to share with you tonight. I think we shared with you briefly, but just kind of give you a recap on that and remind everybody what we did and the costs associated with those projects. And go back to the first one. So, yeah, no, that one's fine right there. So the team was made up of 3 different firms. KG&D Architects, who did the architectural and structural review. CES Engineering, who did the mechanical, electrical, plumbing inspections and oversight, as well as Watsky Associates, who specifically specializes in roofing. And I know that he's done roofing for you in the past. The administration was terrific through this whole course. We had several interviews over the course of the summer, both administration and with the facility staff, town and school district. And they gave us a lot of terrific information, and we used that to then go and inspect the schools. Obviously, we have 4 schools in the district. We really focused on 3 out of the 4 because the 4th one, Miller Driscoll, had significant work done back 6-7 years ago. But what's sort of interesting here is the average age of the schools is 60 years. When you're looking at schools in terms of new construction, schools usually last about 35 to 40 years before they need anything major done to them. When you're looking at renovations to existing schools, it's usually in the 25 to 30 range. So when we look at the individual schools here that we did these inspections, the last major work, and we've done work over the course of every year, every summer, a little bit of work, but the last major work was done back in the year 2000, pretty much, for those other 3 schools. And so we're in 2024. It's been almost 25 years since major construction has been done on these campuses. And I say major because, over the course of time, we've done toilet room projects, we've done roofing projects, we've done some mechanical projects, we've done projects along the way to address issues, but they're specific projects and not kind of a more encompassing type of renovation project. And the approximate replacement value, if we were to start from scratch and build 3 new schools, it'd be over $500 million. And if you're looking at, or actually I guess that's for schools over $500 million, somewhere between $500 and $600 million to do those schools today. And so when we look at Miller Driscoll and the amount of money we spent on Miller Driscoll, actually, if you did it today, it would be, even in that 6 to 7 year difference in period, it's about 50% more in terms of escalation and inflation in that period of time in the construction industry. Next, please. So the tasks that were performed. We reviewed the existing plans and reports that were provided to us. We interviewed administrators and staff. We did our visual inspections, which was architectural engineering and roofing. We provided written reports. We photographed an awful lot of all the good and bad conditions that we saw. And we did a code review in terms of the building code, ADA, energy, and fire, so that as we're looking at these projects, if something isn't up to code, we put that as part of the report. And finally, we prepared a draft report. It was presented on a couple different occasions. Here we are. So just wanted to let everybody know, because we're going to be talking about lots of fairly large numbers. These buildings are very well maintained. Your administrators and your facility staff do an excellent job. It has nothing to do with the fact that we aren't maintaining our buildings. It has 100% to do with, over time, you have to replace things. Things wear out. They have lifespans. When you're talking about roofs, you get a warranty, and that warranty is for 20 years or 25 years. After that period of time, it's out of warranty. And then when you start to have problems, the roof starts leaking. It causes other problems underneath that roof. And so when we're looking at different priorities and the importance of replacing things, you will see later in this presentation that we do prioritize things. And if it's health and life safety, it's a very high priority, because if there's a piece of pavement out there that's spalled or is heaved and it's a potential tripping hazard, that's something we have to fix right away. If it's a roof that's leaking, it's something that you have to fix right away. Otherwise, you're going to have bigger problems. So, I think that's pretty much it on that slide. So it started talking about the prioritization. We have sort of two different categories, and the first one are what we typically focus on when we're looking at immediate needs, and that's life safety. Again, if you have an issue with your roof, we need to fix it. If you have an issue with your heating system, it needs to be fixed or replaced. Priority two are things that don't have to be replaced quite as quickly. When we're talking about priority ones, we're thinking that this is something that over the course of this next calendar year or two, you really need to address, again, because it's going to cause bigger problems. The next category, category two, between 2 to 5 or 6 years, again, those are fairly significant issues that we really should be addressing in that period of time. Can some of them extend out a little bit farther? Probably, but in terms of planning, that's the way that we look at it. And priority three are age-related. And age-related can be anything from a carpet worn out to other systems that still have some useful life in them, but when we're looking at it, we're looking at, in this case, 10 years out. Is it going to fail in the next 10 years? And if it is, that needs to be listed on this priority list. Next, please. So Miller Driscoll, we just looked at very cursory. There's a couple roofing items to address servicing items, mechanical equipment and things on the roof that currently we don't have some ladders, so it's very difficult to access the roof there, although it looks like a one-story building. It has a bunch of different heights and elevations on the roof, and to get from one roof to the other, it would just be better if we had built-in ladders as opposed to people having to lift ladders up onto the roof and try to get from roof to roof. Otherwise, the building's in good shape. So we've broken this down, and we're going school by school here. The first one being cider mill, and the first category being those priority ones, those projects that elevate to the level that we really should be looking at doing these in the very near future. And there's about $4 million worth of work there that we would consider a priority one. Most of it has to do with masonry repair on the exterior. There has been some water issues that have entered into the building, and they've been getting in, whether through flashing or what, and there's some masonry that has cracked on the exterior of the building, things like that that we would really like to fix, again, because we're trying to keep the moisture outside the building. There's a couple other things there, but in general, I would just say that there's a very long laundry list that at any point, if anybody wants to look at the report, there's a much more in-depth report, and happy to go through that with them. Next slide. So priority 2 is a longer list of items and more expensive. There's about $12 million worth of priority 2s. A bunch of that is the roofing, eventually to replace the roof. There's some mechanical equipment that needs to be done. There's some other exterior finishes that a curtain wall that's been patched and isn't elevated to the level of priority 1, but it really is something that should be replaced over the course of the next 5 years or so. And then there's also some site work that's associated with pavement, sidewalks, curbs, etc., some steps and outside railings. Next slide. And here's a few examples of what some of the conditions look like outside. You can see some spalling brick. In the old gym, the original gym, the exterior, the doors to the exiting aren't in great shape, and then the egress from there back to grade and to a safe location away from the building also is should be reworked. And you can see some other issues there, some ceiling tiles that have stains, some flooring where water has infiltrated one of the curtain walls. You can see some brick that's cracked, and a couple of issues associated with sprinklers and the electric. So, the total of that is about $16 million between priority 1s and priority 2s. That's fine. I like this slide, and we did this for each of the schools. And this just shows that these buildings have been here for a long time, and over time, as this town has grown, the schools have grown. And so the original building was built in 1949, and that's what you see in blue. And then there was an addition a few years later, in the 60s, which was the area in yellow. And then again, just before the year 2000, 1998, there was the third edition, which is in orange. And that's the way that the school looks today. But again, 1998 was 26 years ago. And so you come to expect, as an architect that looks at lots of buildings all the time, that after 26 years, you're going to start to see some things that are wearing out. And even when you did that renovation 26 years ago, you didn't address everything in the building. You did some major additions, and you renovated some areas, but some of that is still older than that still. Next slide. So similar, at Middlebrook, there's about $6 million worth of work that would elevate to the level of priority 1. There's a storm line there that needs to be repaired. There's a north curtain wall that's been leaking. There's some floor remediation that has, a lot of that work, I believe that you did this last year, so that one actually, at this point, has probably been fully addressed. And then there's some, you're doing a roofing project this summer.
Yeah.
So again, these priorities, the reason why we put together these reports is so that you have, and Jose has a document that he can go to you and to the town and say, these are our high priority items that need to be addressed. And we have a report that really says which ones elevate to the highest level of needing to be done sooner than later. Next slide. And Middlebrook is an old school. It's been done over 5 different periods of additions, and it's starting to show its wear. And there's about $20 million worth of priority 2 work there. Again, a lot of it associated with the outside and addressing the what we would refer as the building envelope, which refers to the roof, the walls, the windows, the doors, everything on the outside of the building. But not just that, it's also the interior. That if you go into the classroom, the acoustics in the classroom are original. A lot of the lighting is still hasn't been upgraded. And so there's a lot of TLC that should happen to that school to bring it up to what we would all consider to be a school in excellent condition. And this shows some, again, some quick slides of some of the issues that we saw. The roof replacement, again, that's ongoing. The area of tile, which water was coming in through the doors or up through the slab. There's some exterior issues associated with drainage on the site, some steps that have non-compliant railings, and probably the biggest one is the old windows and the limited insulation in the building that really needs to be addressed. In a world where energy conservation is so important, we have a building here that really doesn't have a whole lot of energy conservation associated with it today. And this shows that the majority of the building was built in 1961, and that's what you see in blue. And then with an addition in 87 in green, another one in 1992 in yellow, and then finally the addition in 1998, which is the one on the south end of the building, which includes the main entrance. So, the high school, when you look at priority 1 work, is in pretty good shape. Feel good about that one. $41,000. All we had on there was that we should really have a backflow preventer. And I think that actually came up this last fall when there was an issue there associated with water coming up through the system. So that's something that backflow preventer, I believe, was on all 3 schools as a priority. But once you get beyond the priority 1, the priority 2 list is quite long. And it includes both exterior work, site work associated with pavement, sidewalks, and especially the pavers, both right in front of the main entrance, as well as the pavers that go into the lobby of the main building. Exterior, at some point, you're going to need to address the windows and the siding on this building. Again, with energy code, the siding, there is some insulation built into those metal panels. It's not terrific, but we would suggest or recommend that when you do the window replacement, you consider doing the windows and the siding at the same time. Remarkably, if and when you do that project, this high school could look completely different, because so much of it visually is associated with the metal panels in those windows. I also have a pet project, which would be to green up the main driveway underneath the bridge from end to end, but that's not part of this presentation. Next slide. And here's a few pictures you can see in the bottom left. Those are the spalling pavers that were just mentioned, and the second from the left on the top, which are the interior pavers, which sort of carry that same theme from outside to inside. But I heard even today that some of those pavers are wobbly, so they're loose, and it's really ready. It's time to replace those. Most of it has to do with the fact that those pavers, over time, when you're salting, it will eventually take the finish off. Kids are walking, and everybody's walking into the building with a little bit of salt on the soles of their shoes. They're walking the building, and salt's getting in, and it's spalling the inside just like it is on the outside. That bottom right photo is that aging out siding and windows that was mentioned. The roof of this building, I believe, is the one that's original when the building was built in 2000. So we have a roof that's about 24 years old. Right here. The other roofs have been replaced over the course of the last 20 years. Next slide. So this project was basically built in two different stages. 1970, all the area in blue. And then in 2000, when the cafeteria and classroom addition was built on the west side, and the Clune Center built on the right side of the driveway. So then we get to the fun part here with numbers. You can see the priority ones is a total of about $10 million. And some of that work has been addressed over the course of this last year, and some of the work is planned to be addressed over the course of this summer. So you're already taking this plan, utilizing this plan or parts of this plan to address issues that we all felt were the highest priorities. When we get to the priority 2 list, it's quite a long list with a total of $77 million for those priority 2s, and if you add the 1s and 2s together, it's approximately $88 million. And then the priority 3s on top of that would be potentially another $44 million. These numbers have built in their total project cost numbers. It's not construction. It's all your soft costs. It's escalation. It's escalation based on our understanding of when you're probably going to do this. So those priority 3 numbers, for example, are for projects that are approved in 2031. It's a long way from now. But that also means there's a lot of escalation between now and then, because we base escalation on an annual basis of about 4% per year. The last few years, it's been a lot higher than that. But escalation is starting to come down. I think this year we're basing it on about 5%, and from here on out, about 4% per year. So you just have to, and we build that in because we know that you're not doing these projects next month. These projects are going to happen in the years to come. So what's the basis of estimating? It's the direct construction costs. We use a construction data network for the New York and Connecticut metro area. And so these are regional prices. These are the prices that we see in our public school projects in the Westchester Fairfield part of the country. As I said, escalation is built into that. Soft costs are built into that, which includes professional fees, surveying, testing, third-party inspections. And about 10% of this would be administered by you all, the Wilton Public Schools. The balance of this work would be done by the town of Wilton. And so when we get into the cost estimating and how it gets broken down, working with the town administrators, we put this in sort of 2 different pots of gold. Taxpayers don't look at it that way, but the school district and town does. Next slide. And the state helps as well. And so and I don't know if this has changed since we did this, but your state aid is at 22.86%. If that's still consistent, that means that a project that was $88 million, which were the priority 1s and priority 2s, you'd have about $17 million worth of state aid. So that project would be about a $70 million project if you went out next year and decided to do all the rest of the work. Now, some of it, again, is already in the network, is already being worked out, but let's say you wanted to do a $70 million worth of work. As far as the taxpayer is concerned, it'd be closer to a $60 million project. Can everybody read this one? We have pages and pages of this, and basically for every school, we categorize it in terms of roofing or mechanical or electrical or structural type of work, and then we list the individual items, Actually, can you turn to the next slide? It's a little bit larger. So this is the left side of that sheet that shows the individual line items and then what the quantity of that is, what the unit cost, what the unit we're using and what the unit cost is, and that gives us a direct cost. That gives us a construction cost if we were to do that today. If you could flip to the next slide. But we're not doing that today. And so we have to build in escalation, and that depends on the build year. And so if we're planning to build in 2025, we put a 4% escalation on it. If it's 2026, it adds another 4% of escalation. We also put contingency money on here, because whenever you go out for a project, you never know what's going to be missing, or when you open up a wall, what's going to be behind that wall. Construction, there's always something that goes wrong. No matter how perfect the plans are, no matter how much information we have, there's always something that we want to add. And it might be that you just want to add something to the project. That contingency can be used for the unforeseens. It can also be used for after we get 3/4 of the way through a construction project, you find out we're not going to use all this contingency. But you know what? We weren't able to purchase all that furniture or technology for that space, and now we can make that space whole. We can make it really the way we want to, or we can tell the taxpayer that we don't need this money, we can give it back to them.
So, can I just interrupt real quick? 'Cause I think,
Absolutely.
am I thinking about this correctly? So if you're talking about doing work 10 years from now at 4% escalation every year, you're talking about a 40% increase in
Well, it's actually
from
more.
what it would cost today to do it.
It's compounded, so
Compounded.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so you,
So that priority 3, which was looking 7 years out,
right,
would be 4% per year compounded.
over what
So
that base.
it's probably 40% more money than it would be if you did it tomorrow.
If you did.
So a $40 million project tomorrow would be a $70 million, $60 million project. $55 million.
Well, I mean, think about what you said before about Miller Driscoll, right?
Right,
That's
that-
exactly the
Yeah.
exactly the estimate.
You know, there's a couple different ways to go about these projects. You can do it as individual projects like we're doing this year. We're addressing the most critical things.
Right.
And until we can get to a point where we have enough money coming offline from other projects, for example, Miller Driscoll, when that money comes offline, because you're paying for it on an annual basis, at a certain point, you no longer pay for it. But instead of reducing the taxes, most school districts say, okay, we're going to keep the tax rate at the same level, but we're going to infill that with these other projects. It's like your house at home. You're constantly having to do something to it. You can defer that maintenance for some years, but at a certain point, you have to spend the money and repaint the house or replace the refrigerator. And so it's the same thing here. At a certain point, the mechanical systems are beyond their useful life, or the roof needs to be replaced. Those aren't the projects that you want to, and those are the challenging projects to get approved. When you're talking about building brand new classrooms and state-of-the-art, wonderful media centers and STEM buildings and things like that, everybody can get behind their, in most cases, playing fields. Everybody can get behind things that get people excited and that are going to better the education. It's harder to do that for a roofing project. And so usually when we're doing that, we try to balance both. We're trying to put things that are educationally focused with the things that you have to do just to keep the buildings afloat.
What other questions do you have for Eric?
Yeah, Eric, within the priority tranches, is there then a subsequent prioritization of all the P1s? knowing that like we're not gonna, it's not gonna be a 3-year project, we're gonna have to spread it out.
We've been working on that now.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's another document that Jeff, if you don't mind me taking this one, Jeff Pardo, who kind of splits his time between here and the town, has been working on trying to sort that all out. And, we've given some early feedback, and you saw evidence of that in the round of bonding that went through. So, for us, the mechanicals, addressing the envelope, addressing the roofs, those really are the P1 ones, if you like.
Right.
And then when you start to look at the out years, you get into, there are other priority ones, but some of the priority twos that might be interior finishes, flooring, lighting, whatever. And I think some of the conversations that are yet to be had are about, what Eric just described, because while we have to address the key critical infrastructure pieces, we also need to address the kind of the living spaces that teachers and kids occupy also.
If you're having a tough time sleeping at night, we have another document, which is the written description of all the different tasks and projects in here. So you have the PowerPoint, but there's a whole written project description for each one of those buildings as well.
If I can ask, kind of moving back, bigger picture a bit. So we're talking about, these buildings and repairs that need to be done to them to make them function. Was there a conversation about whether the buildings themselves serve the function of the school building the way we would want them to serve as a school building for the next 20 or 30 years? Did that question make sense?
Yes, I think you're basically getting at, is it worth keeping these buildings, or should there eventually be a consideration of a replacement building as opposed to continuing to renovate existing buildings?
Yes. Like kind of looking from the education specifications to some extent of the building. Like when you walk through the buildings, do the buildings serve, the function, like flow the way you would want a middle school to flow, or serve the function of a middle school or the high school in that respect. And I know there's gradients to that in terms of expectation.
In general, our 4 school buildings are fairly well laid out, and they serve their purposes, and the kids and teachers in them do a good job. There's always opportunities to think about how to reimagine specific spaces. For example, a lot of school districts, and you should as well, look at the libraries. Sometimes they're called libraries, sometimes they're called media centers. There's a whole bunch of different names for them. Most of them, the youngest ages still have lots of books, and they still look at books all the time. Once you get to the high school level, I'm not sure having books in the libraries are as essential. And you have a beautiful space right out here. How can it be reimagined and reused for a whole bunch of other purposes? And so I think there's some educational aspects to this plan that weren't developed to the level that it wasn't part of the plan, was to develop the educational aspects. But I think that there's some opportunities here and all of the buildings that could potentially be explored in the future. But in terms of replacement, this high school, whether you're like it or not, it's built strong, it's built well. There's no reason to take this high school down. It would be wonderful if there's ways to bring a little bit additional light into the building. But it's built as a very strong, durable building. I would say that Cider Mills, with the exception of some of the exterior moisture infiltration, is built extremely well as well. Middlebrook has...
Be good to me, Eric. So be good to me now. I'm sorry.
Middlebrook is an interesting one. I think that when you saw that, there's about $27 million worth of potential work there. And so that would be something. But the $27 million would bring that building back up into good condition. That could be used for another 25 years. And that's the plan. Where we've worked in school districts where they've decided that They want to do a comparison between a full renovation and a replacement. That Middlebrook campus has property available. You could build a brand-new school on the playing fields, tear down, when the new building is finished, you could tear down the existing building, and you could put the outdoor recreation where the existing building is. It's not going to be $27 million. It's going to be a lot more than that. I don't remember the square footage, 180,000 square feet.
Yes.
That's a very big building. And when you start looking at $750 a square foot when you're all done for a building that size, that becomes a pretty big number.
So, and I was more thinking along the lines of, while we're in these buildings doing this work, is there spaces to be reimagined a bit at the same time that, could even like further the utility and the life of the building as we move like forward down the line, as long as we're already in there doing the work. So I wasn't in my mind thinking of a whole new building, but like, you said like the high school could use more light. So if we're in there working, redoing tiles and roofs and other things, like is that?
I think that would be an excellent exploration in terms of looking at your ed specs and having a real discussion as to what is the next generation of Wilton Public Schools going to look like. How are we trying to teach? How should we be trying to teach? How can we reimagine or reuse some of these existing spaces in a different and new way? And we're looking at schools just like these, and we're reimagining them. And so it's not necessarily every single space, but there's definitely areas there that, and again, my focus tonight seems to be on the libraries, but you have these wonderful spaces that are large, great, centralized, and have great opportunities to be redone in different ways. And you also have property in case you want to expand, and maybe there's a program that you can't find a space inside this building. You want to build a STEM lab, and you find a part of this property and you build that STEM lab, and it becomes another appendage similar to what has been done in these schools for the last 60 years. But in this case, it's really more focused, forward thinking, not just putting more students in the building.
I don't know if you know the answer to this or not. So, does state reimbursement require ed specs?
Yes.
So that was, we were talking about this earlier this week. So any project, even if you were going to submit for, reimbursement for mechanicals, you still need. Okay, that's great to know.
They want to see your ed specs. You want to make sure that the plans that you're, proceeding forward with align with your specifications.
Okay.
And
So-
that's when they will participate at state level with reimbursement.
Okay.
If you don't want state aid, which I'm sure every taxpayer that's listening to this wants state aid,
Yeah.
then you don't have to do that.
Is the cost of completing that, was that included in the project costs?
No, it's,
Okay.
and that's a different discussion.
Okay.
We can assist.
Right.
We work and we do ed specs, but I think it's really your administrators should be at the first line of defense here. They're the ones that really should be imagined. We can help. We can show other examples. We can discuss what we see in other areas, but you can talk to your colleagues as well.
Okay.
That's great.
Thank you.
I know in Connecticut in the last 18 months we've had 60% more rain than is usual. If that climate continues, is there anything that's going to fail faster, or anything that we need to think about in terms of water levels? Or I know Middlebrook's pretty boggy in places.
Well, your playing fields. Well, you've seen it last year. There was an issue at Miller Driscoll. I would say that looking around the perimeter of the buildings, we need to make sure that water is draining away from the buildings. That was the case actually on your competition field here. There was a huge storm and it came right down on the field. This building is right up against a very large hill, and so water's coming downhill. And so whenever that's the case, from a civil engineering point of view, we want to make sure that the water is staying away from the building and that it doesn't have positive pressure pressing up against the building. And Cider Mill has a little of that from the hill. Middlebrook does as well from the south side. There's a hill that leans against the 98 addition. So those are potentially issues. Mill O'Driscoll does not. Mill O'Driscoll's kind of at the top of the hill, and so everything drains away from it. We wouldn't expect to see an issue there. But yes, the rain's going to keep coming. We're supposed to get wetter.
Yeah.
Your grass will look good.
And in terms of, you've done this as 10-year long-range planning. I know at the town level that many different years have been banded about from 10 to 15 to 20. But it be your recommendation that this is all done in 10 years? If we can
We as a firm, we love when school districts decide to take a project and try to group a bunch of projects together. We feel that you get the best value for that if you can do it, and it doesn't. In this case, it doesn't need to be in 25 or 26 or 27, but it'd be good to, at some point when you're comfortable, do a project that's more than $5 or $6 million, but really try to do a $50 or $60 million project and maybe it's one school. Maybe you take one school at a time and you say, okay, we're going to focus on this school and we're going to do it right. And then when we're done with it, we're going to be really proud. Because the school district is the pride of the community. When you do a project well, and I think that Miller Driscoll was done very well, and people take pride in the building. And if we took this high school and we renovated this high school and really made it first rate, people would look at this and say, yes, it was a lot of money, but it was really worth it. But if you do $6 million this year and $6 million next year, and maybe that's the way we have to do it, you never get that excitement because you're just picking off little things at a time. Think about moving out of your house, doing a full renovation, moving back in. You're thrilled to move back into it. Wow, it looks great. Just fixing the refrigerator makes you feel good because the doors work, but it's not the same. It's not the same excitement. I'm probably losing friends in town right now.
They might be gaining a few too.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's something to be said that there are kids that are making their way through their schools, right? Our schools now, whose first experience with the schools have been the refinished Miller Driscoll. And they're now actually, that first class is, I believe, 6th grade. So, prior to COVID, there was work done to Cider Mill to make it brighter and happier cosmetically. And so there is something to be said for kids walking into their buildings and feeling positive about their environments and feeling that sense of pride and ownership in that.
Yeah, I guess that was, my question is, does this quote and work preclude any potential other cosmetic things that we would do, say for instance, trying to brighten up the high school? Whether that's lighting or whether that's,
moving the carpet out.
Right, you know what I mean, like, is all this money, would that have to include something like that? Would we need to bond additional money for something like that, or do we have money set aside for more cosmetic things?
So there's no money set aside, right? I mean, the money that's in the board's operating budget is really for repair and maintenance, right? It's not to do some of these larger projects, and that's a choice. And I think that the choice that we need to just kind of consider and remind ourselves that the town owns these buildings, right? And it's a town obligation. And I'm not pointing at town hall, I'm just saying the town. And so in thinking about how these projects are managed, right, they're also competing projects.
Right.
And then, you saw the work that Matt had done in trying to present a long-term bonding plan. And so if you follow that plan, I think to Eric's point, as time marches on here in the short term, space will free up if we're trying to smooth the bonding and keep it at a $10 million level annually. There'll be more money available in the subsequent years. The other opportunity is through non-bonding, and that's as these projects, get closer to reality, we have to talk about, what should be bondable and what should be paid for in a regular annual appropriation, and where should that live. Probably there was a lot of conversation about setting up a non-lapsing cap account that both the Board of Ed and the town could feed from in order to take care of some of these projects. So, that's something that will be another possibility. I think for this group, maintaining the sense of urgency about, pushing forward on the work that needs to be done in the buildings beyond the mechanicals and the chillers, and really thinking about the environment and the spaces that our kids are working into will be important. It sounds like there's interest from Tony in the Selectman's office to establish a committee to really roll up their sleeves and get into mapping out, when exactly we can do these projects. Jeff has already made some headway in trying to sketch some things out. So when this committee finally comes together, they'll have some things to look at and talk about, which is all, very good. Great. Anything else for Eric?
No.
All right, Eric, thanks.
Thank you.
Really,
Thank you.
really appreciate
Very
it.
informative.
Have a wonderful weekend.
We will. Bye, everybody.
Mental health task force.
Yes. So the next two items, the mental health task force, you'll see just in my update here that kind of bleeds into the devices in schools conversation, and that'll make sense when I get to that point. So what I thought I'd like to do just for this first piece, and Kim Zemo had hoped to be here, but she had a conflict, so she wasn't able to be. So I'm just going to update you on the work of the mental health task force that met 3 times over the course of this year. So our initial meeting was back at the end of November on the 28th. We had a second meeting on March 5th, and then a final meeting on May 7th. The participants included Dr. Andrew Gerber from Silver Hill, Ronnie Cohen-Sandler, who is a therapist here in the region, Susan Bauerfeld, who is a very well-known therapist here in the region, Gabe Lomas, who is a professor and runs the social work program up at WestCon, Chandra Ring, who directs the Youth Council, Sarah Heath, who is the director of Will and Social Services, and then Elena White, who is a school counselor at Miller Driscoll, and Kathy Weiss, who is a social worker here at the high school, Kim Zemo, me. And then we invited Crystal Williams and Yvette Cortez from the state. Both of them represent DCF. They were able to attend the first meeting, part of the second meeting. They weren't able to join us for the third. So we had a really good group of expert practitioners. The purpose of the committee was to develop a shared understanding of some of the major drivers of the acute mental health crisis in Wilton teenagers. And we proposed doing that by reading some of the available research, examining our local student data, engaging with these clinicians I just named, as well as some families, and then examining our current practices and procedures with the goal of generating some feedback and recommendations for school services and parent education. So that was kind of our charge. One of the things that Kim and her colleagues have been doing very well for a number of years is tracking some of the acute mental health data of our students across all grades. So one of the benefits of meeting with this committee, Kim, and we started every meeting by reviewing the data that we had, and so we looked at how many mental health crisis referrals we made. We looked at the causes for those referrals. We looked at some of the outcome data to the extent that we had it, and we just tried to make sense of it. So I'll share with you, just some of the trends over time here. Year over year over year, so for the last three, we had a stable number of emergency mental health interventions in the three lower schools, so Middlebrook, Cider Mill, Miller Driscoll. Combined this year, as of May 7th, we had 33. Last year, I think there were 35, and then the year before that, maybe 32. And so, a fairly consistent number. Across the entire school year, in all grades, in the year 21-22, we had a total of 84 emergency interventions. The grades with the highest in that year were grades 4, 8, 9, and 11. This is going to be important in a second. Last year, in the 22-23 school year, we had 71. So total number is starting to come down. The grades with the highest incidence were grades 5, grade 9, grade 10, grade 12. Okay, so three of the four high school grades. As of May 7th, we had 43, so this year, so a fairly sharp decline in the total numbers. The highest numbers of incidents were in grades 7, 6, 5, and 3. So 7, 6, 5, and 3.
Oh, high school.
Right. So the total numbers come down, but there's also been a shift in this last year away from the high school grades to the younger grades. And so that's, you talk to Kathy and Jen, talk to George, they'll confirm that for you, that, we've had more kids with more issues in those grade levels compared to the high school. So the types of concerns that came forward at the secondary level, the highest type of concern was suicidal ideation, which required that students need immediate attention. Some other concerns across all grade levels were physical incidents at home, suicide attempt, self-injury, or reports of abuse or neglect. More anecdotally, our staff was reporting year over year an uptick in mean and harassing type behavior, and so if we were tracking through our Gaggle database, we saw more reports about that than we had in previous years also. So general trends, things seem to be stabilizing at the high school. There are some growing concerns among our youngest kids, and within that are growing concerns about just kind of mean and harassing type behavior. In terms of outcomes and feedback from the committee, we weren't looking for this, but the committee really positively affirmed and applauded the work of Kim and her team, the crisis interventionists at all of our schools. They affirmed the proactive measures and the systems that we've developed over time and implemented, and felt like we really do have a strong and comprehensive set of tiered supports for kids and families. So, that was, I think we knew that, but it was great to have that feedback. Between the program at Silver Hill and then the Wellmore Urgent Crisis Center that's open now in Waterbury, we have better immediate response mechanisms to conduct diagnostic assessments. So if we remember a couple of years ago, this was a real gap in services. When kids were in acute crisis, they would often, because there was no place for them to go, they would often get referred to the emergency room, where they may or may not be seen by somebody with some mental health expertise. Oftentimes what happens is kids would go to the emergency room, they'd be seen by an attending physician, they would be released to their parents, and then they'd wind up back in school the next day without actually getting any kind of diagnostic assessment or treatment. So Silver Hill launched a program 2 years ago. New Canaan participates in that. Weston is participating this year. We have an ad hoc opportunity to participate, and then there are 4 centers around the state. Wellmore is the closest one for us, where when we have kids in crisis and they need to receive a diagnostic assessment, we can send them there. They receive the assessment, and then they get referred to therapists right out of the gate. And so that's made a difference for families. They feel like there's a better safety net there. So that's a positive. The access to longer-term care, because of the issues around insurance, are still, plaguing all of us, and that's not just a Connecticut concern, but that's a tough one, and this committee didn't have an answer for that. It's beyond their purview. the opportunity to talk about some of these issues and really dig in deep, Kim found extraordinarily beneficial, as did Kathy Weiss, as did Elena. And so having the ongoing conversation about our student data and then being able to drill in and getting questions from this group really helped them kind of sharpen their own thinking about, what they were seeing, what their assumptions were, and then, helping again to more critically examine the practices that we had in place. We also talked quite a bit over those 3 meetings about, all right, so what's next, what's missing? We were asking them to push our thinking about, all right, so where are the gaps? So two pieces of feedback emerged most loudly. The first was a recommendation for us to develop stronger parent engagement in education. And so the way that unfolded is we were, talking with these, various practitioners. They were offering their own insights from their own private practice and then making connections to, some of the stories that our staff was sharing. And, what became, clear was that oftentimes at home parents encounter issues with their own children, and they're not sure who to turn to, or how best to report, how to reach out, and they're not even sure kind of what it is that they're experiencing. And so this group felt like we could step in and provide some education in a different and more comprehensive way. We talked quite a bit. Chandra was in the room, and as you know, the Wilton Youth Council does a magnificent job year over year, offering good, important, timely parent programming on a range of issues. Some of the challenges they have is you get the choir that shows up, so it's the people who are most in tune, come out, and so we're missing a large swath of the community in the way that we set that up and run those now. And so, there was agreement about, we can definitely think about some different ways to reach out to parents. One of the ideas that emerged in this group, and I think it's come up in other conversations as well, but as a school system, how can we tap into those moments when we have captive parent audiences? And what messages or what, very simple training or support can we provide when we have them all here? So thinking about things like back to school night, we had made a conscious choice several years ago in those moments to try to give as much time as possible back to the classroom teachers. And so, where in the past there might have been, large gathering assembly, I can remember vividly being in the middle school cafeteria with Jory, and then, he would do his thing and then send everybody off. We've gotten away from that, where we just now people come in and they go right to their classrooms. And so we're thinking if we recapture people and then have a really tight, short, powerful program on something, that might be one way to reinforce a message or a set of messages, or to provide some additional resources or make them available for people who otherwise might not know they exist. So that was one, I thought, really good, strong idea that came out of this group. The last conversation on May 7th, we spent a lot of time talking about cell phones, and so this will kind of be a natural segue here in a minute. And that was in part, Jonathan Haidt had just published his book, and so everybody's reading that, and there's been a lot of media coverage about just the pervasive access to cell phones, the role of social media, the perceptions that people are developing about what that means for kids, and how social media and the use of cell phones and the like are potentially degrading, kids' interaction. So a lot of conversation around that. And I think it was Susan Bauerfeld, who I thought framed it really beautifully, in the context of this conversation. About, do we stop and think about, and do we teach kids to think about their own relationship with their device? And so I would invite you to think about it for yourselves, right? Because that was kind of new framing for me. Like, Patrick, this is rhetorical, so don't answer. What is your relationship with your cell phone? Right, so those kinds of things, really stopping and creating some reflective moments. And then what should it be? Right, and so there's the educative opportunity for us, both for our kids and for our parent community as well. Let me just, give me a second to go back to my notes here. So I think that just the last piece, and then I'd like to just transition. I'm happy to take some questions, but I'd like to kind of segue into that next conversation about devices in schools. The this group of practitioners, in as much as we found it really informative and valuable, they did as well, and so they found it helpful for them to connect to each other because they work in different places and don't have opportunities often to come together, across a community like this, and so they're interested in just kind of retaining the opportunity. So what we agreed to is, we'll take, 2, maybe 3 opportunities next year. We're going to continue to track and report out on the data that we collect from kids. We're going to continue to try to move forward and, take advantage of the recommendations that they provided by thinking differently about some of the parent programming. But we're going to bring them back together and just continue to do what we did this year. So provide some information, develop some feedback, and continue the conversation. And I think, with respect to, the board and, the rest of the school community, to the extent that it makes sense for me to come back to all of you or to some others to share out and provide, if there are further insights that will be useful for everybody, we'll just put them out there. Happy to take some questions on that.
I just have a question about, I know over the past however many years, we've rolled out a lot of SEL curriculum in the schools, and I would just be really curious to see when certain curriculum was rolled out, if there was any correlation to grades that did better or did worse, right? Like, was there specific
That's a good question.
areas that they covered during the SEL that tended to stick more, depending on the year that they were in that school? Because there's clearly a little bit of a correlation there, right? So is it possible that something stuck, or maybe something wasn't the right fit for that particular age group?
I mean, along those same lines, I was kind of curious if that push down to the younger classes is being seen elsewhere, and if there's kind of a different set of systems or tools that we need to help address it, because the behavior or the circumstances are different also than from what we've seen before. So our current set of tools are meant to solve for maybe a different problem.
Yeah, Kim could certainly answer that question better than I could. What I can say, just more generically, because I've involved, at least at my level, with my colleagues in conversations around student mental health and well-being, and none of what I've described for you today is unique to Wilton. That this is a pattern that's pervasive, beyond the state. There's, I think across the board, we're seeing young kids who are acting out and, behaving, differently in schools. Yeah, I don't know if any of you guys want to weigh in
I
here.
agree. I've heard it's quite a pattern across the state, beyond it. I've talked extensively with Kim, who is kind of concerned about it too.
Are there any working hypotheses as to why that is?
I don't have one myself, and I think that's something we all have to pay attention to. I suspect it's multi-factor, like so many things. Did the impact of COVID, play a role here? Potentially for some. Have family systems changed over time? They have. I think, there's a different. If you read Jonathan Haidt's book, he's got a very strong theory about major shifts in society. What he describes, this is not necessarily impacting the youngest kids, but he studies parenting over time, and what he writes about. It's the same thing that Lenore Skenazy, if you've ever seen her, talks about, right? Generationally, parents are different today than they were, a generation ago. And so how does that manifest itself? When you were younger, when I was younger, when we were all younger, we had greater opportunities for free play and independence since, 2010, 11, 12, maybe a little before then. There's been an increase to the structure around kids. He chronicles in his book, even though the world has gotten safer, the media has portrayed the world as more dangerous, particularly here in the United States. When Lenore comes to visit, this is what she talks about with parents in a very funny way, but it's also not funny, it's tragic, because kids, what happens when kids don't have those free play opportunities is they never learn the negotiation skills, that we all learned on the playground because our parents didn't intervene for us. So.
Or resilience.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bevy of skills that kids learn through independent play and experiences that aren't supervised by adults. So, I think that's a factor here too. You in a community like ours, you add the very strong desire and the concomitant pressure that comes to perform, and so that plays a role. So what that looks like in data is incredibly elevated numbers of kids experiencing anxiety or depression, and so we our folks here deal with that as well.
I think we have anxious parents too, and that gets to the kids. I think parents worry about their kids not being successful, not being able to meet the grade or do the work, and so that creates anxiety in a house, and that we have a lot of anxiety in our kids, and they're acting out. But I think also the parents are anxious about what happens to them in the schools and whether they're going to be all right. Not so much their safety, but about their performance.
Generally speaking, culturally, we're having difficulty tolerating any distress at all.
Yes.
So we don't like to feel uncomfortable in the least, and we don't like to see children uncomfortable. So we come in to make them comfortable. And so whenever there is discomfort, the level of normal anxiety around even like level 2 out of 10 discomfort
Right.
is heightened. And so it's a distress tolerance skill building to be able to feel a little anxious and still be okay.
Right.
I'm not gonna die, I'm gonna
Right.
be okay. So we're seeing increases in panic attacks. Kids, they have their phone, so the minute they feel that, they call somebody. Instead of saying, let me sit in this for a minute and breathe it out and I'll be okay, they're immediately calling someone who then raises their anxiety and it's off to the races, right? So it is the management of distress and self-regulation, knowing you're gonna be okay in the face of some distress is really challenging.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the worry brain is yeah, and it's everywhere. So you have to learn to deal with the worry brain, and either find a way to push through, or not fall into it, but manage it in a way. And I think we have a lot of kids that have worry brains that are struggling with how to make that, and so they have to act out because they don't have any other way of dealing with it.
Yeah, one of the areas that this committee, was very complimentary about many things, but noted that one of the areas where our school system, seems to be a bit pioneering is the way that we're teaching DBT skills, and that's a practice. And there we have great data too, mostly at the middle school, just about what kids have learned, and then the kinds of experiences they're not having because they've learned a whole toolkit of distress tolerance skills. And so that's a program that we've been steadily, expanding, both with adults and with students. So that's really, really good, powerful, proactive work that we'll continue to do. I wanted just to set up the conversation about devices, just to throw some information your way, just to kind of paint a picture here. I also thought the timing was really interesting when we were having the last committee meeting and we spent the full second hour talking specifically about cell phones in kids' hands and the potential harmful effects of cell phones and the access to social media when it's unfettered. And I feel like, since that time, for the last 2.5 weeks, every time I've turned a corner, opened my computer, there's a new article or a new something that's raising the flag and asking the question about whether or not cell phones in schools should be banned. And so in the last 2.5 weeks, I've done quite a bit of reading and talking with all kinds of people about that. And so I wanted to put it on the table for this group tonight for just some further discussion. So just consider some of these numbers here. Among undergraduates, so kids in college, 134% increase in anxiety since 2010, 106% increase in depression since 2010, 72% increase in ADHD since 2010. That comes from the American College of Health. Among U.S. Young people ages 18 to 25, anxiety's increased 92% since 2010. Among U.S. teens between the ages of 12 and 17, there's been a 145% increase in those who suffer from major depression since 2010, and a 161% increase among boys, though the prevalence rate for boys is much lower than girls. That comes from the U.S. National Survey on Drug Use and Help Teen Suicide. Teen suicide. So ages 10 to 14, 109% increase among boys since 2010, and 134% increase in girls since 2010. That comes from the CDC. So 67% increase in self-harm since 2013. Instagram was launched in 2012. And so this author, Jonathan Haidt, draws a direct connection. So that point has been well debated by other scholars, and so there's a robust conversation underway right now about can you draw causation between these things? But here's one researcher who has a very strong theory. So what he writes about in his book, he refers to as the Great Rewiring, and he kind of talks about two pieces to that. One, that play-based childhood, that what we were just talking about, independent play, free play, and so on, has really been on the decline, and it's been replaced by phone-based childhood. And so he talks about the prevalence, the increasing prevalence of cell phones, and so one of the points he makes, statistically, in 2010, almost no kids had cell phones, and I think about the time I was principal of a middle school up in Bethel at that time, and I can remember vividly being out on the curb with kids, and I remember a year, it was like cell phones didn't exist. Some of the adults had them, smartphones I'm talking about, and then there was like a year where every kid had one, and it was almost overnight. And so in his book he writes about this trend, and what he says is that prevalence and access to cell phones was the most rapid adoption of any technology in the history of man. And so in 2010, almost nobody had them, and by 2015, everybody had them. And so Haidt is kind of drawing a connection between the emergence of mobile devices, cell phones specifically, the corollary increase in the number of social media apps and social media as a phenomenon emerging in that time frame, and then the transition away from play-based childhood. He also points out that that's the same time frame when teen mental health begins to take a real dip. With specific regard to cell phones in schools, Haidt writes about 4 foundational harms. So he's, big picture, what's the problem here? One he describes as an opportunity cost. And so thinking about all of the time that kids are on their devices, what aren't they doing when they're on their devices? And so a simple way to look at it is all the time you're texting, chatting, scrolling, you're not paying attention to your biology, you're not talking to your friend, you're not solving a problem face to face. The second one he describes as social deprivation. And so he has some data that suggests that the amount of time kids spend interpersonally with their friends is down 65% since 2010. Sleep deprivation is the third, and he reports that sleep deprivation among teens is up sharply since 2013. And then the last one is attention fragmentation and behavioral addiction. I think attention fragmentation is fairly self-evident, There is no such thing as multitasking, You're either paying attention to this or that, but not both simultaneously. And then the behavioral addiction is just that the way these things are built, They're designed to poke you and give you a jolt and to draw your attention away from whatever you're doing, and then you become dependent on that behavior over time. So in response to that, one of his recommendations is to take phones out of school. He's got some others. People say "Wait before 8" is one of the new slogans. And his recommendation is no smartphone before high school. is another recommendation he makes is to keep social media out of the hands of kids until at least age 16. And then increase free play and independence, something that, we've been working on, for a long time, right? So I wanted to come back to this idea of phone-free schools. And just in the region, this is a very robust a robust conversation among my Durgay colleagues. And so, we're doing things like reaching out to the folks at Yonder and learning about these Yonder bags and trying to figure out, who's doing what, when,
Is that like the
is
stuff
it
they have at
working?
concerts when you
Yeah.
go? And
The night
It
I was
is,
actually
yeah.
going to ask about that.
Yeah, so there are, in just kind of setting up this conversation, I've given you the all of the bleak and kind of ugly pieces of it. There are benefits to cell phones. Some of them, especially if you have kids, right? If we have teenagers, we appreciate the direct connection to them. We can reach them. Hopefully they text back when we text them.
They have their own time.
Yeah, students, when kids are asked, they enjoy the entertainment value of social media, and they enjoy the opportunity to connect and communicate with their peers. There's also kind of a safety dimension for some kids, and so, one of the examples that was presented to me recently is, if you've got kids who are, higher anxiety, being able to text a group of friends and figuring out in advance which lunch table to meet at, can make a whole difference in a day. And so, just to keep the conversation well-rounded here, right? It's not a total loss about everything with these things, but in thinking benefits and drawbacks, right? Are we, by allowing them, are we causing more harm than good here? And that's where I just wanted to, to open it up.
So I've been joining you not directly, but indirectly in a lot of this reading. I think it's something we should more than seriously consider. I think that my personal leaning is that the benefits do not outweigh the cost to have the phone in the school for the 6.5 hours that you're here. And I think that some of the things like that you talk about, someone with high anxiety and being able to text and find out where friends are at lunch will morph into doing that the night before. Or other types of mitigating strategies. I just was so overwhelmed by some of the literature that just shows how distracted your mind is, even when the phone is near you, but not. That it's just even the presence of it, you're wondering if something has come up, or if some text has come in, or if something's been posted, and that just cuts your concentration. And I think about it too, even in the workday, that the ability to get work done when you turn the dinging off of your emails coming in versus how much longer it takes you to get a task done. Because I think the science shows that it takes almost 3 to 5 minutes for your brain to reorientate back to where it was before you were distracted. And I do think that there is, an addiction component to it with adults, with kids. And I have come to this from the opposite feeling a year ago. So I think that it would be worth our time to put together a committee or a task force to really kind of study what it would look like to go ahead and create a middle school and high school environment that's cell phone free. And I mean, when I say cell phone free, I mean either like a Yonder bag or a locker, not just like a check-in locker when you first walk into the building, not kind of your own, up to yourself to self-police yourself.
My one question, maybe even be for you, is that would there be any eventual individual education plans that would potentially have a kid need to have that in there. And then once you open that door, it makes it very difficult.
Well, I think will I anticipate someone attempting to bypass the policy? Absolutely. The question will be whether, in dealing with the medical professional who's gonna write the letter that says a child must have a phone as a result of the disability, I think we're gonna have to, we really will need to ask the question, tell me the nature of the disability that requires a cell phone doesn't exist right now, in my view,
Right.
right?
But
That doesn't mean there won't be a
it's coming.
doctor's, it's gonna come, of course it's gonna come.
Yeah.
But we'll have to take each case, like we always do, individually, and address what's the nature of the disability that requires that, and what other accommodation. And so, what's the accommodation you're looking for,
Right.
right? The cell phone, we have counseling staff, they could get immediate assistance. Right now, the cell phone is often a barrier to the child seeking assistance from someone in the space they're in, because they're calling outside the space. And then the parents are calling the counseling center, and it's taking all this untold time because the child is not, this will cause
A lot of distress.
a lot of distress
Distress, I
among the
agree.
kids and among their families, because they're gonna go home and they're gonna be upset with their families, right? It's gonna be a thing. Part of what would need to be understood is how we as a community are gonna help manage our distress, right? Parents are texting their kids all day long, people. They're not gonna like that they can't. They're not gonna like it.
No, they're not gonna like that they don't have
Right?
access,
That doesn't
for
mean
sure.
it's not the right thing to do, and we can get over the hump, but the hump of that discomfort is going to be real,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been reading as much as I can find, and Vanessa Elias has been great. She sent me a whole raft of articles just this week. So there are a number of emerging test cases around the region. There are a couple of school districts here in Connecticut, and more than a small handful in Massachusetts. And so most of these are about the use of a Yonder bag, and so the pattern that's reported in most of these articles is, generally there's some pretty fierce pushback, primarily from the kids, primarily from high school kids. But once they get used to the pattern, they step back and say, oh man, I'm so happy to be relieved of my device for the time that I'm relieved of it. And that's been consistent in just about every article. There are also some notes in a couple of places where kids had various medical concerns, and so the districts made exemptions because there was a bona fide reason for that child to carry a device. I imagine that can probably get tricky, but there are places out there that are wading through those waters right now that we probably learn from.
And I think it's also important that we're talking about the boundaries of the school day. So I think that talking about what is the primary purpose of the time that should be spent in this building, and given, that there's only 6.5 hours of the day, and the standards are greater, and the the educational needs of our kids are really what's of paramount when they're in the building. And so I've just been spending a lot of time just thinking about educationally to take that other burden off of them and remove it from them. And it's removed from everybody, so it's not as though anybody feels singled out. It might not feel that way in the beginning, but I just think that it could just be such a gift.
Do we have any data of schools that have tried it and failed?
I haven't seen. I'm sure there is someplace. I haven't seen it yet.
Right. I would just be curious, like if someone tried to implement it and
It just blew up.
disaster.
Yeah, the only
Right, to see what the outcome was, and then just really quickly to follow up with that. if there was any legal barriers to us making this type of demand of
Mhm.
families and students. And if there is any legal recourse from a parent to say you have no right. Right, like, I don't know if there is. I have to imagine, like, if they're in our school and it's a public school and they're with us, then we should have the right to do that. But I can imagine hearing that from parents.
Well, it doesn't mean anybody can challenge anything.
Yes, right.
So there's always going to be a potential for a challenge.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's kind of like when cigarettes had to leave the building, right? Back when I started, there was a teacher's lounge and there was smoke billowing out from under the teacher's lounge. When I went to school, that's what it was like.
Yeah.
And then we said cigarettes are not allowed in school.
Right.
Right?
And
It
then the
was a
kids
big
would
thing
see
for a
them in the
minute.
bathroom and used to
and
have
then
the
it was
security
over,
guards
right?
coming into the bathroom, and now it's like there's no kids don't even,
Contraband.
doesn't even
Yeah.
come.
Right?
Like,
You have
enter
different
their-
things are
I'm just trying to imagine all the scenarios, is all.
It will
I am
happen.
100% behind this, by the way. Like, I think it's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, you know what I find, I've been thinking about these, you know, and don't mistake my thinking for a sales pitch here, because that's not where I'm going. But these Yonder bags have gotten a lot of traction very recently, and they've been in the news, and just even the bit that I read earlier today. What's elegant about them is kids get to keep their devices, and so the devices have to be off, and they're, you know, these things are magnetically sealed, so the kids can't get into them. But you're not taking them; like, they have them, and then, you know, whenever they can unlock the bag as they're heading out to the buses or wherever they're going. So, you know, there's some logistical questions about that, but I find, like, that's interesting to me, and so they get to hold on to it, so you don't have the possession concern. You're not making it a teacher's problem, which has been, I think,
Right.
one of the real challenges
Yeah.
in recent years as we've tried to control, you know, just cell phone use. You get all of the variability across the number of staff, and then you've got, you know, differing attitudes. You know, sometimes teachers want to use them for academic concerns, other times, you know, it's okay if you have them out, other times it's got to be in the shoe caddy and whatever. And so, you know, some of the, again, the emerging literature is suggesting that those approaches aren't effective. And if you're going to do it, they've got to be off, they've got to be away. You know, this is one elegant solution, because that way you're not purchasing scores of lockers that, you know, then, you know, you're managing, you know, a whole different set of concerns. So, you know, it's something, I think, you know, we also have to be clear, you know, Ruth, you said this a minute ago, like, what problem are we solving for? And this is, you know, this idea of thinking about, you know, a relationship with a device and how that impacts your other relationships, that was a really powerful expression, you know, when I heard it, and I've been thinking about it since. And I think that's what we're trying to solve for, is we recognize, you know, anecdotally through the literature that, you know, many kids have a real challenge here, adults too.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we have the opportunity to impact that and improve interpersonal reactions, you know, and help maybe impact, you know, some of those other concerns that come along with obsessions around social media, then we're in a better place. What we're not fixing is all of the discipline stuff that these guys deal with all day, every day, and that's the poor behavior online, off school grounds, outside of school, right? So, you know, this is one piece of a larger concern, and so there really has to be, alongside this, you know, lots of conversation, you know, with parents and families. I think, you know, as I've gotten into these conversations over the last couple of years with families, one of the pieces of feedback I always hear, it's one I live with myself, is, well, everybody else has got them, so I can't be the one dad who says no. So we really have to figure out a way to link arms with more families in this community where, you know, we can give each other cover. You know, like, you're not the only bad guy, right? Patrick's the bad guy, and Ruth's the bad guy, and Pam's the bad, like, we're all bad guys.
And they don't believe you when you tell them.
So I think,
No, they don't.
right, it won't help the kids, but it'll help parents.
Yes.
And I think that's
Solidarity
the
is-
challenging
yes.
piece.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but I think also, and hypothetically, it may give kids confidence in themselves and their ability to have relationships and to be without it.
you know, I'm curious as to like, and some of these schools that have implemented this, it's just too soon to know. But like, is there follow-on behaviors that happen from, you know, how kids feel about themselves and their relationships to themselves and each other from spending their school day without their device?
Sure.
So there was
Yeah.
a recent study that came out of Denmark, I think it was,
Yeah.
where they took the cell phones away and the students reported much greater feeling of well-being
Yeah.
as a result of that. But they were very careful in planning how they did it.
Okay.
I wonder whether or not we have done enough conversations with the school community about the what, why, and how we're gonna do this, because just putting a policy in place could backfire.
Sure.
Yes.
So I think we need to proceed very carefully.
Yeah. No, I think that to get a group together that consists of board members, parents, even high school, Middlebrook students, you know, really dig in and look at, you know, what a potential policy would look like, how it would work.
Pilot it?
Yeah.
Apparently the
Look at,
elementary's out.
yeah.
The elementary
Yeah,
kids have.
no, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think it would be
It's gotta be a
district-wide.
district
It's
policy.
like if, I think it would be district-wide.
Yeah, would have
but
to
I
be,
think-
would have to be.
Yeah.
Well, they had a no device day Wednesday?
They
Or
did.
Thursday?
Tuesday.
Tuesday. How'd that go?
I can tell you how, I've got some data about it. Go
Oh,
ahead.
yeah.
You know, it was a start. There were approximately 200 plus kids who turned them in the morning.
One of them was mine.
And there were students who wrote a pledge. So if you go over there right now, you can read the pledge about students writing that, you know, they're doing this because they want to be more available. They want to be available
My
to
daughter wanted the
friends.
sweatshirt, no offense.
Got the sweatshirt, yeah.
Raffle incentives was number 6 of the top 6 reasons.
I was like, what? That's great, okay.
At the end of the day, I went around to some classrooms, and the teachers were really trying. There were a lot of, you know, it was a bit of a throwback, frankly, to, you know, paper and pencil and different type of learning tasks. And so a lot of the teachers were trying to do it. There were some teachers that I spoke with, because in my walk, just about all the teachers were doing so. And then I went in, I saw all devices out. Then the door was locked, and I had a meeting, so I didn't go in. But I talked to that teacher later, and he said, well, you know, I was device-free at the beginning, and then at the end, there was something that I needed to do that required it. So it was a start. I can tell you this, if you walk through the Wilton cafeteria, which I did a shift down on lunch duty, and the kids' phones were largely out, and they're playing games. I talked to a lot of them, and I said, how's device-free day going? And some of them wanted to put it away right away because it was me. I'm like, I'm not telling you to put it away. I'm just asking you, are you capable? Are you capable of doing this for any period of time? And a lot of kids were honest, just saying, I can't. Including in the morning, right outside our offices. You know, they were already out. So it's going to take a lot more work, but for the students that it may have helped, like you're saying, I hope it helps some students. And I think we have to commend the Hope Squad for taking something like this on and saying we're cognizant of the way that we are, you know, more connected to devices than we are with human beings in our school, and this is something worthy of further examination, like this discussion is leading. So, those are some general observations.
Thank you.
So is that then the next step is to convene a committee? We can
Yeah.
Yeah,
pull that together, so we're on that tomorrow?
yeah.
Okay.
I think that would be, and I think having some outside, like youth council, like some
Yep.
community stakeholders that had their pulse on some of the research and,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
All right, so then I'll work on that in the next 2 weeks, and I'll come back on the 6th with a more formal proposal of kind of who, how many, what the goals are, those kinds of things, what kind of information we want. Okay, maybe a timeline.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
The last one's just the 24th.
Yes, the 24-25 BOE meeting calendar. So this is our meeting calendar. So,
And it's just on for review and discuss, just so you have it, so you guys can take some time over the next couple of weeks just to check the dates, and then we can have it up for approval on the 6th.
yes. And also just make sure that it matches
Oh, sure. Yep. I think the other piece I'll just call out for you, so we took some of the feedback that you
Thank you.
provided after our last workshop together, a little changing the structure of the budget workshops over a course of several weeks at night, smaller bites.
Six.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, great, yes.
Can't believe we're looking at budget dates.
So.
Never ends.
Never
ends. It never ends.
Just hot.
PTSD.
So, we have a regular meeting then December 19th of '24, and then we don't have a regular meeting again until February 6th. So I think that's too long to go without a regular meeting.
Okay.
So I think that there just might, I mean, we can schedule a special meeting if we need to, but I think that maybe within that month and a half, that
We
6
could
weeks.
always, I don't know how long the budget workshops are.
Yeah, like attach something to it, or just,
Yeah.
it's just to think
Just like a
about it.
short, yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. And because once the budget workshops are considered special meetings, so you can't add anything
To the,
to the
Yeah.
agenda. So we would just have to.
Yeah, we could
Yeah.
just publish
Something, yes.
a parallel agenda.
Yeah, a
Sure.
parallel agenda or something like that, but just to
Okay.
think about that.
Yep.
Okay. And nothing under discuss and approve. Under future business, we had a board meeting on June 6th. We have canceled the board meeting for the 20th. Are there comments from the public?
Do I come up or?
Whatever makes you
Okay.
Sure.
comfortable, come on up. You can have a seat, stand at the podium.
Yeah, just tell us who you are and where you live.
Hi, I'm Michelle Perino. I live on Hummelscamp Road. I have 2 kids in Wilton, and my husband grew up here. And it sounds like you're going this direction, but I came to say, please do something big like the Yonder pouches. So the phones are off and away the whole day, every day, all the time, as much as possible. Kids can't curb their phone addictions alone because adults can't either. And please help parents to help our kids because we're not doing this well alone. The evidence that Kevin so helpfully discussed is clear at this point. Smartphones drastically affect students' mental health, and the opportunity cost with their ability to experience and learn skills for real-life social interactions that are critical for their happiness and even their career success. If we're able to put the phones down during school, just that would make such an enormous difference in the kids right now. So this was my first board meeting. Thank you.
All right. Want to participate on a committee?
Yes, please.
Okay, we got our first member.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Any other comments from the public? We will adjourn at 8:48.
Oh, I'm gonna.